Tech for Development, Enhancing Africa's Digital Economy for Youth Employment. And we'll be having one of our participants joining us online, but we are happy and thankful that the rest of the participants are here. And so first we'll welcome the moderator for this session, the Chief Executive Officer of Jobberman, a seasoned executive boasting nearly a decade of expertise in diverse areas such as product development, forecasting, planning, data analysis, business intelligence, and human capital development across the dynamic region of East and Middle Eastern Africa. As Chief Executive Officer of Jobberman Nigeria, he spearheads Nigeria's recruitment platform with an impressive user base of over 3 million job seekers and serves as a trusted partner to 60,000 employers. Jobberman Nigeria, a part of the African Talent Company, is resolutely committed to the noble profession of addressing youth unemployment in Nigeria. We are very proud and happy to have Ore Boboye with us. Please, let's welcome him. Thank you, Ore. Thank you. We're also very happy to have with us the Chief Executive Officer of WootLab, a seasoned professional with over 8 years of expertise in international partnership management across Commonwealth nations. As CEO of WootLab, she has transformed the landscape of youth empowerment. Her visionary leadership and strategic acumen have fostered impactful collaborations in youth programs, innovation, technology transfer, economic inclusion. Her initiatives have positively impacted over 300,000 youth, focusing on marginalized communities in Nigeria. Please let's welcome Chioma Okoro. Thank you, Chioma. Thank you very much. We're also very proud and happy to have with us here this morning the Chief Executive Officer of Prunedge, the founder and president at Technology for Social Change and Development Initiative, Tech for Dev, a nonprofit social enterprise that creates access to decent work and entrepreneurship opportunities for undeserved young Africans through digital skills empowerment, advocacy, directly reaching over 2 million people annually across Africa. Let's welcome Joel Ogunsola. Thank you. You didn't want to come with your parachutes. Thank you, Joel. We are very happy to have you here. Our next panelist is the technical advisor to the Honorable Minister of Communications, Innovation, and Digital Economy, and also business advisor, a strategy consultant for Africa-focused startups, VC funds, and investors. He has worked with thousands of startups and SMEs in various sectors across Africa, and until recently was the head of startup success for Google in Africa. He has worked in technology-based roles, creating channels for tech to interface with businesses in over 10 countries in different sectors, including finance, retail and investment banking, education, media, power, agriculture. And now he focuses on building an African ecosystem that supports innovators and entrepreneurs. Please, let's welcome Fola Olatunji-David. Thank you very much. You're also leaving behind your... Please come on. Thank you. Thank you. And joining us online is Iyin Aboyeji, the Chief Executive Officer of Future Africa. Is currently the Chief Executive Officer and General Partner of Fund for Africa's Future, popularly known as Future Africa. Africa's largest seed stage investor, which has invested millions of dollars into over 100 startups across Africa. Prior to that, he co-founded Flutterwave, a $1 billion global payments platform connecting African businesses and individuals to the global economy, and served as its founding Chief Executive Officer in May of 2016. We'll also welcome you, Iyin Aboyeji, who will be joining us online. And I will hand over to Ore Boboye to take charge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to my esteemed panelists and distinguished guests. So this morning, of course, it's an honor to moderate this very interesting conversation. Speaking to tech for development and enhancing Africa's digital economy for youth employment. To kickstart this conversation, I would like to just mention a few points that will set the tone for this conversation. Number one is internet penetration in Africa, and of course Nigeria, because Nigeria is a big player in the African space. So Africa has experienced a significant increase in internet penetration over the past decade, with approximately 43% internet penetration and about 55% in Nigeria. But then if you then overlay that on the population, right, then you see that the number is significant on the other side. And the world average for internet penetration is 68%. So it's important for us to acknowledge that there are still challenges and we need to address how to bridge the digital divide on that front. A second point that I would like to bring to the fore for this conversation is youth demography. Africa is home to the youngest population globally. 70% of Africa is under the age of 30. That's amazing and interesting. Great. So it's important for us to bring this conversation to the fore on how we can engage this young population and also ensure that there is the gap that we have is then bridged for digital inclusion. Then we have economy and funding, because there are a lot of investor funds that Africa has benefited from in recent years. However, there was a sharp decline, quoting a Q1 report, especially in Nigeria. So there was a 92% decline, which is sharp, really sharp, compared to Q1 2022. So Q1 2023 compared to Q1 2022, the amount of funding that Nigerian startups got, right, really declined significantly. And then finally, the digital skills gap. There still remain a very huge population that does not know how to engage with the digital economy and also the digital infrastructure. So I'm excited to have this esteemed panelist here. So I have policy person, I have a market operator, I have a tech trainer, and tech talent manager, and I have a VC, a venture capitalist in the panel. So makes it a very robust setup. So I'll kickstart my question with this, and this is to everyone on the panel. From your perspective, can you assess our current status? So just judging Africa and Nigeria, how are we performing? How are we faring? When you look at the digital economy and the tech space in Nigeria. I'll start with Chioma, and then we go across, and then to Iyin. Iyin, sorry. Go ahead.
Hello. Okay, just checking. Thank you, Ore. I think that we are not where we used to be. I think we're doing well compared to other African countries, although there is a lot of room for improvement, especially in the area of digital infrastructure. Those are the key indicators for us to actually assess where we are in terms of digital penetration. So there's a lot of work to be done in digital infrastructure, especially for organizations like ours that are targeting underserved communities. It's one of the key challenges that we face when we are doing our training.
Thanks a lot for the question. I think that from a continental and national standpoint, I think that we've definitely seen some progress in terms of this greater awareness about the fact that the sector does have a lot of opportunity, and so more people are starting to look both from a operator standpoint as well as from young people looking to get skill sets, starting to look into the sector. However, you then still have challenges around quality assurance, infrastructure gaps, which of course people like Fola are working sleeplessly to fix. I think that what's most important is that we definitely do recognize the demographic dividend that we have, considering the youth segment, new population that we have. However, we're still quite some distance away from really achieving and getting the type of quality for talents that we need to drive the type of transformation that we need from a development standpoint. Thanks.
Thank you, Ore. Good morning, everyone. I think, the other panelists have spoken about the current assessment of things. We've, for many years, we've spoken of our position in relation to the continent. We're doing well for Africa, but we need to realize that ultimately our competition has stopped being Africa a long time ago, and we operate in a global economy. So when we put ourselves side by side with the global giants or the people who we want to compare with, a developer trying to get a job today, they don't ask you, oh, you are the best African, hence we're going to pick you. They check you in comparison to India, to Pakistan, to the US, and see how good you are. So we have to start evaluating ourselves. And that's where the real scales drop from our eyes. And then we see that there's so much that we need to be doing across multiple indices. So you mentioned internet penetration. And we know that even if we're doing decent for Africa, we're doing poorly in the world. One of the favorite scales that we look at are trade export for technology. How much technology trade export are we exporting? We're the second to the last in a group of about 80 countries being ranked. How much artificial intelligence are we as a country? I'm not talking in individuals. We're number 61 out of 62 countries being ranked. And that is where the next charge has to happen. Yes, there's some form of readjustment, as will always happen. If you look at the indices, like how much funding has been going into the ecosystem, it's sort of like a readjustment period. And with most readjustment periods, it's not easy. And so I believe that the next phase for us is to continue to ask ourselves hard questions, like what role do we play? Ultimately, it's an ecosystem, and the government alone does not make up an ecosystem. The private individuals, the corporates, the trainers, the learners. I'm hoping at some point I would speak about the work that we're doing, but I think for us, it's just about a current positioning assessment and say, okay, exactly where are we? Let's leave all that giant of Africa conversation and let's ask ourselves very honest questions that where are we and what is the work that needs to be done?
Thank you, Fola. Iyin, your thoughts?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, fantastic. I think we're not doing very well. That's my point of view. And the reason why I say that is that, we've come a long way. There's no doubt about that. And we've succeeded against a lot of odds. However, the ultimate test of technology ecosystem is in the level of productivity and the level of growth that it brings to its home country. And I think we've done a lot, but we still have a lot more to do. If our progress as an industry doesn't translate to broad gains for the populace, and that requires an ecosystem to do that, then it's useless, right? It doesn't make any difference to anybody. And I think that when we think about that, there are a number of things that we have to start taking more seriously. The first, of course, is how do we get more people into our industry, right? I think that we've done a lot, but not enough to essentially democratize digital literacy to our current and future users, and also to ensure that we systematically bring in more young people into the industry. The second thing is really with respect to supporting local industry to become more productive, right? A lot of us have prioritized money over national interests. And so where our banks are being attacked and we're just there, it should be a shame to our industry that something like that is happening. And that's a big problem. Unfortunately, we think the measure of our success is just individual success, a Nigerian syndrome, as opposed to the national interest, right? And so that is something that we have to win ourselves over because of our increasing influence in the space. And I'll say, finally, and most importantly, right? I think we've wasted a lot of money in the good times. Instead of building true value at home with the resources that we were lucky to get during the boom times. And I think that those chickens are coming home to roost now. And so we have a lot of work to do to right that ship. And a big chunk of the blame, in my opinion, government has a share of it, but a big chunk of the blame is the lack of leadership in the sector. And that's something that has to be addressed urgently.
Thank you, Iyin. So a key point here is it's not just one person, it's an ecosystem issue. We've come a long way. There's a lot that we can still get done. So I'm going to direct my next question to Fola. Just as a as a key stakeholder or a representative of the key stakeholder here, which is government. What is the role of government in all of this, right? And it's important for us to understand that because that is the yardstick we then use to measure success or failure, right? So what is the role of government in all of this? What should we look forward to, right, from government as part of the solution, for these identified problems or challenges?
Thanks, Ore. I think you can ultimately break down government's role into three major buckets. The first is to enable. And enabling essentially means that when people want to do something, you ask yourself, how do I make it easier for them to do what they want to do? How do I remove the roadblocks that might stop them? That's the first thing that government has to do. The second is to regulate. And we also have to reimagine regulation as not a stifler of growth, but a way to say, how do I make it safe to make sure that, people with bad intentions don't have an opportunity to make it an unfair playing field for people, whether, corrupt officials, whether hackers, like Iyin spoke about, whether, people who don't have the right qualifications to operate. And the final one is to create opportunities. Government's key role there is to say, let's think 30 years down the line, let's think 100 years down the line, but let's also think 1 year down the line. How do we create opportunities for people to thrive, for the populace to thrive? And if you break it down, and I can speak specifically about my ministry, the ministry I'm privileged to serve under right now, we've asked ourselves these questions: how do we support, how do we enable, and how do we regulate in the right direction? And so about a month and a half ago, we released a strategic blueprint. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, but what we identified in the strategic blueprint are 5 key pillars that we want to focus on over the next 4 years. These pillars, we believe, will serve to do all those 3 things, support, enable, and regulate. The first of those pillars is knowledge. We ask ourselves, how do we improve the knowledge and how do we increase the digital literacy of the country? Now, we're doing technology trainings, we're upskilling the technical ecosystem. But beyond that, there's a larger ecosystem of everyday people who don't need to know how to program. They don't need to know how to be engineers. All they need to know how to do is to operate a phone, to use an app. Because if we increase the complexity of the average person on the road, it means that government can deliver services digitally. It means that even the private sector can deliver their services to a larger pool of people. And so that's the knowledge pillar. Under the knowledge pillar, we also have technology training. How do we think about ourselves as a net exporter of talent? How do we upskill the ecosystem, the technology ecosystem? And also we have research under that. How do we continue to think about new trends, new things that the government needs to be doing? And that's the knowledge pillar. Next, we have the infrastructure pillar. We spoke about infrastructure earlier. And infrastructure could come from things like, the internet. How do we increase the broadband and the internet penetration across the country? But also infrastructure needs to be thought about from the perspective of how do we increase the digital public infrastructure. And at the very base of that is identity. If you don't know who's in Nigeria, if you don't know who your target market are, if you don't know who the citizens are, you cannot support them. But identity goes beyond even just people. It goes to things like places. And so NIPOST, for example, must work because NIPOST has the largest distribution network for us. It's every single city, major city, every single major town. There's over 3,000 locations. And so that is the infrastructure part that we're thinking about. The next is policy. Like I said, policy is reimagining regulation not just as, hey, stop there, don't do this, don't do that, but more like saying, how do we help you do this quicker, better, cheaper? How do we create sandboxes so you don't have to feel like you are a criminal building a fintech app? How do we encourage you and say, before you sink capital, here are the guidelines. Before you want to work with the ports, let's take you to the ports, experiment, speak to the right people, so you don't just go and waste money somewhere. The fourth pillar is innovation, entrepreneurship, and capital. It's self-explanatory, but we are thinking about innovation differently. Technology innovation is pretty much saying that with the same level of inputs that you have, money, capital, people, manpower, land, labor, what is that unique thing that you can apply on top of this that will increase your total factor production? And so we're thinking about this from sector to sector. How do we put innovation in agric? How do we put innovation in healthcare? How do you do innovation in entertainment? How do you do innovation in education? And finally, we have trade. I spoke earlier about our technology, trade, export. We need to think about our position as a facilitator of trade, global trade, but also technology trade. You might be thinking about the number of tech startups that we have. A lot of these companies are US companies, at least on paper. They might have 90% of their operations in Nigeria. Yes, Joel. But they're US companies. So we need to think about how do we increase the trade that comes out of Nigeria? How do we, from a technology standpoint, domicile? And I wouldn't hog the mic any longer, but essentially as government, those three things ring true for us. Every day we ask, how do we enable? How do we regulate in the right direction? And how do we support? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that deserves a round of applause. Thank you. Okay, so my next question is to Iyin, and as a major stakeholder in this ecosystem. So there is government, and then there's the private sector, still speaking to responsibilities, right? Iyin, this question is to you. How can the public and the private sector collaborate, to ensure this equitable access to digital opportunities? Just plugging into some of the things that Fola already mentioned. How also can we, people that play in the private sector, the tech space and the private sector also start to come to the table, right? And also, be held responsible. What should be their pathway and their focus here?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is that we have to be ready to lead as a private sector. So what that means is that, we have to have a common front. We have to agree on our priorities as an ecosystem. The big danger I see, particularly with having a somewhat capable minister from the private sector, is that we then absolve ourselves of any responsibility to lead. And that becomes extremely dangerous, right? And I'm seeing that trend in the ecosystem. First of all, we have to stand up to be counted, right? The minister has shared his own vision. I can't assume that we all agree. I definitely don't agree with everything in it, right? I agree with a lot of it, but not everything. We also have to have our own vision of what the space should, how the space should evolve. I also think that when we now have that, I think ultimately government, we are government customer because we pay them taxes. So we now have to now engage as a group and define different things. In the last administration, which was much more hostile, we started that process with the startup bill. And of course, now that we have one of our own there, we have now decided to abandon it, hoping that because we have one good man in government, we don't need to do any of our own role of holding government accountable anymore. And that's very sad to see, right? We still need the consultative forum set up. We still need the labeling. We still need all the things that we worked really hard for in the last administration and got to pass to actually be implemented. And the structures that we've set up for managing the interplay between private companies and their regulation such that it's unified. We need all those mechanisms and instruments and organs to be effective because they are law. Now it's not even a question of asking for permission. They are actually law, and not implementing them is illegal, right? So these are some of the issues that we need to do. But I think the first thing would be for the technology industry to come together around a very clear set of goals. And I would argue, for me, it's very simple. Number one, how can we improve the productivity of the companies in Nigeria, right? Our banks, our telcos, they are at the turning point of digital transformation. How can we help them to catch up, right? Government, how can we help them to catch up? right? Number two, how do we defend Nigeria's cybersecurity interests? How do we leverage technology to do that? And by working together, right? By eliminating fraudsters everywhere we find them, and by cutting off their sources of talent supply. And then number three, how do we leverage technology to provide more jobs for young Nigerians? Those are the three priorities for me, at least for the next decade. And I'm really hoping that my colleagues can collaborate to do that. I think it's dangerous to leave the sector to government. No matter how well-intentioned the people in government and competent, the people, in fact, the more competent they are, the more dangerous it is for us to leave it to government.
Thank you so much, Iyin. Okay, my next question is to Chioma, and this is, addressing the third leg of this ecosystem, and that's the talents themselves, right? I mentioned the large population. We've talked about the government involvement. We've talked about, the private sector. For the guy on the street, right? I want to be a part of this, right? What are the essential digital skills for African youth? What essential digital skills do we need to put out there or make available or give better access to, so that they can also play in this, because they are also a major key stakeholder, in this conversation.
Okay, so just so you know, we are private sector as well.
Okay.
So. Right. So just like Fola said, right, we're not just looking at the tech skills, right? There are a lot of people that can just use their phone. Doesn't mean that they need to learn to code, right? And this is something that we also focus on when we are developing our curriculum, because we understand that we can't expect everyone to be programmers, because that's like the reigning thing, the in thing right now, right? However, we know that it's very possible for you to have a mobile phone and to make money off having a mobile phone. So how do you do that? You can become a content creator, right? There is an ongoing program that we're actually designing, and we are looking at how people can turn their passion to wealth. And this is because, if we all agree, a lot of us, what we studied in university is not what we're doing right now. And we probably did those things in university because our parents had to pay, and we had to just do those courses. But if you look at the university student, take example, a young woman learning computer science, but she's on TikTok every day. She's creating content, and how can we turn that passion into wealth, right? How can we provide that guidance to make sure that she's able to do something that she really is passionate about? Because that is where the spirit of entrepreneurship comes in. And this person can then go on to create jobs for other people when she leaves the school, right? So in able to do that, for us to do that, we really need to look at that infrastructure. How can we adopt certain policies in terms of how the telcos use the spectrum that they get? I know that there is a policy in South Africa that ensures that when a telco is about to bid for the next spectrum, there are certain rural areas that they're expected to have coverage before they're able to bid for a higher spectrum. Because what happens most times is they get the spectrum, they're not using it, right? But they just, outsource to other telcos. But with that kind of policy, you are ensuring coverage, which will also help with the digital divide. Now, is this the kind of policy that Nigeria can adopt? If we think about it, most of our telcos are heavy in Lagos and Abuja and Port Harcourt. Don't get me started with where I'm from, because there's no internet there. So it means that someone in my village will struggle to even know what ministries like where Fola is working is doing for the youth, because there is no platform for them to get that information. So the digital infrastructure is a major thing, because with that, we're able to get into those places, those underserved communities. We're able to sensitize the communities, the tribal leaders, the caregivers, to get their buy-in. Because, I mean, this is Africa. We understand that there are certain communities that when we go in there, we're not able to do our work because we're not able to explain or sensitize properly about the reason why we are trying to breach the digital divide. So I'm asking, what are the things that we can do, private sector, public sector, to ensure that it's not just pushing digital infrastructure in the big cities, but in the smaller communities? How can we also work together to make sure that we're sensitizing properly and making sure that there is a gender balance? Because I know that a lot of women think that technology, tech space is just for men. No, it's not for men. And you don't need to be a developer to be in the tech space. I can't code to save my life. But there are so many things that you can do in the tech space. There's so many things. We have a number of people that are able to do a basic design, graphics design, right? And they're earning so much money off it. And this is something that we like to tag as other livelihood opportunities, because you don't have to get a direct job before you can create employment for yourself. So I think I'll stop there now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chioma. All right. So this question is to Joel. So you are a market operator. You interact with talent a lot. You've had to interview and sieve out and get talent into your business and all. And I know that you've at one point or the other said this: what are the universities doing, right? So this is an opportunity to actually advise the educational institutions. While the government is doing a lot to bridge the gap and ensure that there is digital education, right? The universities, the traditional educational institutes, right? What should they look at, right? As they prepare to push talent into the market, what should they start to build into this talent so that they become relevant in the digital economy that we want for Africa and for Nigeria?
All right, thank you very much. I think it's quite an interesting question, and I hope that my university doesn't withdraw my certificate after this. I think that fundamentally the problem is you can't give what you don't have, and I think that's pretty much where it starts from. I studied mechanical engineering in university. I could not operate a lathe machine throughout my time in university, and very simply because my university had these large machines donated by Nigerian Brewery, about 50 years old machines, about 120 of us in class, 45 minutes time slot for the class. How do you even get to run through the process? And that was one. Two, when you also look at how a lot of the recruitment has happened, and if you went to a public school, maybe those who went to Covenant, Babcock, a lot of the private schools probably had it better. And we also see that in the outcomes. I started my career at Microsoft, and we had a team of us in Nigeria, from the set I was recruited across Africa. And about 9 of them were from Covenant. So definitely I think the schools do something great, and the rankings show for it. But when you come down the spectrum to, government schools, you realize that a lot of people finish with the first class and then they get retained by federal government policy and then no practical experience. So we all graduated from the same university, no practical experience, but you were able to cram and regurgitate very effectively, and so got retained in school. And the cycle continues. And so you've had now years and almost 1-2 decades of weak professors producing weak professors. And it's just, you produce a bunch of papers, have a number of publications, and it goes on and on. It is what it is. However, you've started to see, and that's why, for example, when people like Iyin Aboyeji started Andela, people were dropping out of school to to go join the Andela 4-year program, basically. And it was just evident because people realized that the certificates were no longer relevant. And that's simply the fact. I think almost every employer today would say you would employ based on what the person can deliver, not based on what the person studied. When I got into Microsoft, I was an engineer. I even had an extra year. Nobody asked me for my certificate. I got in, I started to work till date. I've never had to use it until I was going to apply for a master's recently and I had to go get the certification. But it also then goes to the part of government. And I'm happy that Fola is here. And, Fola can take brief on behalf of the government. And I was just reading something on Twitter about how ASU is starting to protest about government requesting for 40% of the revenue being generated. Education is not cheap anywhere in the world. She's spoken about South Africa. You go to Ghana, you go to Rwanda. Everywhere in the world, education is expensive. In the US, even though they try to be socialist, it's super expensive to get quality education. And we need to understand the fact that universities are grossly underfunded. And so if you can't, today, I don't think anyone in the room wants to be a lecturer. People are lecturers by, sir, you're very old. Your generation is quite different, sir. I think in our generation, people move to lecturing because there's almost no choice. Very few people are passionate about it. So you finish your first degree, you do a master's. After the master's, no job, you move to a PhD. After the PhD, you get retained in the system as graduate assistant. And people live at the hellest possible, And so the very best people who are able to then, who have practical experience and who have, information and alternatives will always migrate from the university. And so I think that government needs to, at some point, make a decision to pull the plug. Maybe just like we've pulled the plug on subsidy, partially, as the case is. We need to also significantly start to think about how do we fund the academic system and what models, would exist. But, away from that, I think that in the short term, because that pretty much seems like a mid to long-term solution, on the very short term, private sector possibly needs to start to aggressively also support. If we want certain type of outputs from the university and we want to work with certain quality of graduates, we need to start to put our money back into the system to make that level of investment. And that's very critical. For computer science graduates, for example, can our technology start? So now you have unicorns, that luckily my friend and our brother has 2 of those in his belt. Can he fund a train-the-trainer upskilling program for lecturers, where lecturers can now get practical experience and ensure that they can cascade that down, downwards to their students, ensuring that's. And I also think that the work the government is doing, they have a lot in the pipeline. I'm sure there's a lot more that they are going to announce over the next couple of weeks in terms of how they're also going to work to strengthen the academic systems. But definitely, private sector needs to play its role. We need to put our money where our mouth is. If we want a certain quality of talent, we need to start to fund labs, innovation hubs within those schools. Innovation hubs by design are not necessarily economically viable. And so someone needs to subsidize that cost. Someone needs to put that money into it. All the startups, all these billions of dollars in revenue and profit needs to translate to some value down the line. Because at the end of the day, we're going to be stuck with the talent that we've invested in. So yes, government has its own role to play, or private sector needs. And then you also then think about non-profits further down the line. People like, Chairman's entity also has a strong non-profit that's done a lot of work. Beyond the startup bill, we equally need to advocate for an upgrade and recurrent review of our curriculum. I'd say that the curriculum probably is globally the same, but then the learning content and the learning methodology, allowing students potentially, for example, maybe, take some practical courses with other organizations and use the unit, apply the unit. We need to start to redesign. I think education is one of those sectors. When I was American, I was in education, and my boss would always say, education is one of those sectors that has not been transformed by education. Same blackboard, same students, same writing, same lecture notes, same style, almost running school. So we need to rethink the process. And innovation in this case is not necessarily technology, it's just around the approach. How are we delivering that process? We realize that experiential learning is more valuable these days than in-class learning. How do we find that balance? So there's a whole spectrum of what needs to be done. It's a multiple helix model where private sector has a role to play. We need to fund. before that funding from government comes, we need to fund practically. And I think when I was in Akure, myself and a couple of friends started the first innovation hub funded by private sector, academia, and government. The school gave us the land. Government put in some money for the infrastructure, but we've continued to put in the resources, that's in my alma mater in Futa, to keep the hub running. And those are some examples of what we think we can do. But most importantly, there also needs to be continuous conversations around this. Now, ASU wants to go on strike. There needs to be some form of mediation between the employers and ASU. It's not just about government sitting with them to negotiate pay. Is what else can we do to improve the conditions of service, to ensure that, because they also are interested in graduating quality talents. They would say the teacher's reward is in heaven because they have to wait for years to see their students succeed before they can actually take credit for that work. So they also want to see their students. They are proud to say, my student is now a professor, my student founded this, my student founded that. Prosperity should not be limited to the elites, to people who go to private schools. Prosperity should be for all, and it should be decentralized. Thank you.
Just to reiterate, a note to private sector, put your money where your mouth is. If you want good talent, invest in education. So I'll give our audience opportunity to ask questions. Wow. You said? It was quick, yeah. Okay, so I can see 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow. I can just take 4, right? So I'll go again. The lady in front, the lady on glasses, the gentleman behind, and the gentleman on blue. All right? It's just so we have a good balance. All right. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Chioma Okoro from Guardian. So I have this question for Tech for Dev founder. I'm not sure I got the name. Is your name, sir?
Joel.
Okay, so Mr. Joel. I know of Techstars. I know Tech for Dev's Techstars. And I know many other tech dev organizations do this kind of empowerment. But my question is, I feel like to an extent, this thing is kind of still limited. Techstars, this tech empowerment are usually, majorly for educated ladies, educated girls. So what happened to the millions of girls that are uneducated? They are still uneducated. So I feel like we're piling the treasure on the minority, and the majority out there is still uneducated. I'd like to give numbers. So there's this statistic that says that, according to Statista, that 26% of girls, only 26% complete secondary school education. That means we have like 70-something% that do not complete secondary school education. And most of these empowerment are obviously for at least someone that has a secondary school education. So what happens to the 70-something%? They are doing God knows what. I mean, it's an amazing thing that the 26% have been upskilled by these initiatives. But what happens? I'm saying, I'm not sure if this is a question or a suggestion, but more like, can the initiatives be designed in a way that the uneducated or dropout secondary school girl can somehow maybe not be given the within the walls secondary school education, but be educated enough to do something? I don't know if the hat up. Right. So there's that, please. Then I think Miss Chioma, Miss or Mrs. Miss. So you mentioned something about the availability of tech opportunities in the unavailability of tech opportunities in some communities. I think it was a question. So I'm not sure. Maybe I'm asking a question based on your question, because I'm actually from Ibadan. Like I hail from Ibadan, and to be honest, I mean, like you said, Lagos, Abuja, that's where it is happening. Ibadan is large. Ibadan has, I mean, so many things are good, but then having opportunities there is almost impossible. Now, there are so many youth, obviously, in Ibadan. So what happens? The average Ibadan youth probably just concerned about TikTok, about Instagram. And, there's information online. Yes, there's information online, but then I feel like there's a way your community decides what you even see online. Because, if your gang, your circle is all about the trend, the funny thing, that's the only thing I'm going to see online, because that is what the community dictates for you. So maybe this is a question. I think it's a question. So is there a way that, I know it's obviously going to be easy for a tech brand or initiative to start up in Lagos. It's easy. So many things are in place already. But is there a way, like, I actually had to leave Ibadan to come and work in Lagos. That's the fact. Is there a way, like, I didn't have to leave. I could actually be based in Ibadan and be working. So is that possible? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We'll take all the questions, but I'm very sure the speakers will note the questions. Yeah. Straight to the questions. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Joy Igoche, and I really want to appreciate the panelists. Now to my question. We're talking about leveraging on technology and enhancing the digital space. What role can our educational institution play and the society in terms of catching them young? Because there are still schools where people are still drawing grass cutter and hibiscus flower when they are supposed to be doing other things, that will enable them to be more resourceful in this digital age. So that's my question. Thank you.
I think the education question should go to Iyin. So please, Iyin, take note. That question will be for you.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
So, Joel, my question is to you. You said education is expensive or should be expensive anywhere. But what's the place of government policy in terms of making sure the basic one? Because I want to believe your definition of education should be relative in that context.
Yes, relative.
What did China do differently? Because the level of technical education in that country and some other countries is very huge that the results are clear. And also for Fola, on behalf of government, I also want to put this to you. Do you think the priority on education is right now? Like the reference he made to professors and all, it is obvious, and that's why the result is still what it is, even after years of all this old thing. So what is government doing differently as well?
Thank you. Last.
Thank you.
So thank you for this. My name is Fola Olatunji-David. So my question goes to Mr. Fola again. Sorry, sir. Sorry, I will do a little bit of reference here. Was it not last week I was in Iwo, and it was so funny. I saw this little thing, 3 guys, and they are both, below the age of 15, I'm very sure. Very, very small. And while I was trying to listen to their conversation, and what I heard was they were talking about something around the cyber crime of the thing. This is growing. Another one now is
something around what they were talking.
Cyber crime.
Okay.
No, I don't want to.
Yahoo.
Okay. So secondly, now I realized something. All these network marketers. I don't want to make. I don't want to names like the. All these that they are selling drugs and telling people that you can make millions, those. Now, I realize they are using another methodology. Now, they will invite teams that they want to build them up, empower them with tech. And through this, they are trying to actually sell their product and do this network marketing. I don't know if any journalists have been noticing this. I have witnessed this myself. I saw one that was even preaching it to me. I was like, huh? So now my question is, I see that the life of the teen is becoming something I don't want to talk about. And I realize that private schools are even hiring techs to teach. It has been included in some private school syllabus. They are hiring. So the question now is, what is the government doing to help the young ones? The teenagers right now. Thank you.
Okay. There's one last question from our online audience. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Osenata. I'm from Click Nigeria Internet Radio Station. Now, my question is to Mr. Fola. How do we get government to update their websites, especially government parastatals? As regards employment issues, people have been scammed to get a job.
Yeah.
A lot of Nigerian youths these days have gone on social media. The ones who are creating content on social media have been frustrated because of this situation. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take one last question from the online audience.
Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. Sad I cannot be there with you in person, but it's good to see all the faces that I see. I'm just going to ask my question very directly to all the panelists, because a lot of young people ask me, what concrete skills do they need to get a good job online? And Iyin, I know you and I have talked about this before, about how you go through, you take kids through a process that takes quite a bit of time. And so I'm going to ask the question in two ways. What concrete skills, especially today with generative AI doing a lot of coding, what skills do people need to get a job that can pay them minimum $3,000 a month? And how long will this take? How long will that take to get that kind of job? The second question, which I also want to ask to all the panelists, is what role does media play, particularly the news media, in this transformation, tech for job transformation that we're talking about? I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Toby. Okay, so the way we answer this question is we'll just go per person. All the questions are assigned to you. You answer at once, and then we'll close it from there. So, Chioma, I'll start with you.
Right, okay. I'm going to try to remember what the lady asked because she mentioned Ibadan.
Inclusion, location inclusion.
Yes. But I want to answer her from the Ibadan standpoint. We actually have people working from Ibadan right now. So what we are trying to achieve is providing that knowledge and opportunity without the Japa effects, without the brain drain. Now, you mentioned that a lot of people are online, their friends are on the TikTok and all of that. So it means that they have access to internet. So I like that. So if they have access to internet, it means that they can leverage a lot of opportunities that are out there for young people. I think it was last year that ASU went on strike for 3-4 months or something like that. And we implemented a program for students, and you would not believe the outcome. They didn't have to leave their homes. They were across the country. There were, I think, over 5,000 of them. And when we got our feedback, a lot of them were very responsive about how they are now able to do graphics design, web design. These are things that you don't need to write a single code to do. So to answer your question, there are a lot of opportunities that you can access without having to leave where you are. However, I like to say that there is a growth system in everything that you do. You can't get into that space and expect that you're going to start earning $3,000 on your first job. You need to understand that growth. So when you start with the basic digital skills, we expect that you grow to the intermediate, to the advanced, and the highly specialized. Put in the work, you will get there. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Thank you. Joel, so your question.
Thanks. I think your question was very specific about, what we're doing for staff. I think I'd love to start with a disclaimer that says, it would be foolhardy and lying to say you can save everybody. There's limited resources. There's willpower to do as much as we can, but you just can't reach everyone. And so, when the resources are scarce, you then start to prioritize based on who does this resource make the most impact to. But that doesn't say that we don't have a lot of investment across a lot of rural communities. Today we have about 79 digital learning centers across Nigeria in all the 36 states today. So it's in partnership with American Tower Corporation. There are boxes that are containers, have 12 computers in them, and are put in very rural communities where accessibility is a key issue. Because you would agree, and we would all agree today, that without a device today, learning the technology skill set is not sustainable. And that's primary. You can't potentially learn to do graphic design on your phone. You can read about it, you can watch videos, but you can't practicalize. And once you can't practicalize, there's a problem. And so there's an economic gap where the cost of device, and I know our good friends at the ministry, I was with him last night, they have tons of plans to ensure that in another 1 to 2 years, everyone who wants to have a device, who can learn a skill set, would have a device. But as of today, we're not there. And so you have to look at interventions and programs that help you bring it closer to people. So for young people in communities, we have 79 of those. I know in another 3 to 4 months, we'll have 18 more of those deployed. And next year, we'll have another 28 more deployed across all the 36 states in Nigeria. And why? American Tower Corporation is the company that operates your mast and base station. So you have electricity, you have internet there. You put a box there, you pipe in the electricity and internet, and people can learn. And that's been ongoing since 2019, specifically. Tech for Dev has been engaged in that project since 2019. We believe that fundamentally, digital literacy should be for all. And it's because today you need some level of digital literacy to survive. Whether you're a organizer or you're a trader, you need to be able to use WhatsApp, send a picture, ask someone to buy this for you, order something online. And that's constantly evolving. And to ensure that we can deliver on that, we created the Basic Digital Education Initiative about 5 years ago. And the idea is to ensure that people in public, primary, and secondary schools can have access to digital literacy, the right curriculum, the right learning content. However, again, you'll discover that there's lack of infrastructure to deliver. And so if you've ever seen this popular picture of a school in Ghana where the computer science teacher was teaching the students, and they drew the computer on the board, on the chalkboard, and was pointing it. And almost everybody went to a public school probably would have gone, best case scenario, you had the manual, and you had the picture, and they were showing you one button, code button, depending on what age you got introduced to computers. And so what we've done differently is we've prototyped, and I was mentioned to Fola that it would be nice to see the HM to show him. We've prototyped a toolbox, and it's nothing new. After we started our journey, we realized that Vodafone in East Africa and BRCK, the founders of HiHub, have a device. It's a box that has solar powered, has tablets in there, have keyboards, but then they are movable, and the content sits on the box, and then you can synchronize once every quarter or so. And then, because already, our education system already makes provision for computer science within the school calendar. What you need to be able to provide is some form of infrastructure and learning toolkits that enables the experience be real and enables students to understand better. And that's something else we're doing. But ultimately, I would say that we're continuing to ensure that we can provide access for as many more people as possible. Access to device, cost of data is a big barrier. There's arguments about whether the cost of data is cheaper in Nigeria than anywhere else. But it's all relative. And I think the young man behind us said it's all a relative conversation. For the Women Techstars program, we're now in 22 countries. We have beneficiaries across 22 countries for this year. What we're doing next year is to ensure that we're able to provide a non-interest device loan program. Basically, you are going to be able to apply, get a device when you start your program with a moratorium of about 9 months, because we do support them with internship placements and job placements once you're done with the training. You, however, need to come with a guarantor, but it's a non-interest loan program. If you finish the program, you don't get a job, you return the device to pass it on to someone else. And that's being supported by a mix of financing. We're currently figuring that out today. We have partners who've committed to that, but we need to reach a certain milestone to be able to roll that out. It's a multi-stakeholder and multi-year journey. We're not going to get there in one step. I think the investment, and I would allow him to speak to that, but the investment being made on their side significantly also moves us, further down the line. But I would say that, we're always going to be constrained by how much resources we have, by the level of infrastructure that exists on the ground, even in areas where the NCC has built tons of computer labs. There's not strong enough. You have about 778 communities in Nigeria today where you don't have connectivity. I know Nicomsat has said some stuff about working with Starlinks. Coincidentally, ProNet happens to be the local enterprise, deliverer for Starlinks in Nigeria. But again, there's the cost factor. How much does the Starlink box cost? How much does subscription cost per month? There's the data cap and all of that. It's going to take multi-stakeholders and multiple years of engagement, but we need to see it as a ripple effect. We start small and continue to scale. And I think luckily the ministry has introduced the 1-10-100 principle. Again, I don't agree with everything they've said. I will pick the ones that they've said that are really great. And that shows we can pilot and see how it works. We would iterate. And I think it's a principle we should all apply across all forms of endeavor to ensure that we're able to adapt the learning process. To the question around the cost of education, again, I do not hold brief for government. Fola holds brief for the government here. In my own personal opinion, I've, however, looked at the cost of education, of what it costs to get quality education, and any of our older parents or professors that have gone abroad for masters, we all know what it costs today. I think it's no news how much it costs to japa and pay for school in the UK. It is not news to anyone anymore today. So when you look at the quality, and that's what we consider quality education, we're migrating towards it because we believe it gives us quality education, and the quality education gives us a better access to economic opportunities. So when you start to think about it, and you compare to what we pay, I mean, I probably maybe paid less than 500,000 throughout my stay in university, and we want to still get the same quality of education as someone who went to Covenant. I don't see how that is. So we need to apply some theory of relativity, to our expectations of what we will get out of the system. The lecturers themselves also have issues with remuneration. Today, Toby was asking what it takes to get $3,000 in earning. I don't know that there's a professor in Nigeria today that earns $3,000. Even emeritus professors. There is none in a public school to $3,000 today. Maybe $300, yes. $3,000 today. Whereas you have students, I know students who are in 400 level who earn $5,000 from remote work. So the scales are not balanced, and it's a myriad of effects that come to. So it's not one effect. It's not government alone. It's not, because also we need to understand that as a country we don't have all the resources we think we do have. Dwindling revenue, FX devaluation. Anybody who was earning 200,000 8 months ago is earning 100,000 now effectively. When you put devaluation, when you put inflation and all those factors. So again, I say education is cheap from a relativity standpoint. However, should that warrant increase in tuition fees? No, because affordability also then becomes relative. However, I think that there is need for critical and urgent, reconvening, some form of referendum around the state of education. What do we need? And this is resources that I think is trapped within private, today. So you see a lot of wealthy Nigerians now creating new universities. I think that while that is great, I think we need to reconsolidate resources. And again, when you look at the universities that have been built, Yale's endowment today, for example, about $33 billion. Harvard's endowment maybe is close to over $100 billion. I mean, the figures might be wrong, but somewhere around that range. That's our entire annual budget. But the endowment is an endowment because people who have left the university, who are successful, have decided to give back into the institution. And that's a culture that we don't have as a country, ultimately. That old culture of giving back, I read in his tweet a couple of days ago about him going back to his alma mater, serving on the board, investing, how the school now is able to keep tuition low by ensuring that they've been able to innovate. There's a lot of investment coming from alumni. And that's a very practical example. Again, it's not going to be a government-only solved problem. It's a and the moment we start to see it as a me, you, and government and private sector, some of us have parents who have the kind of means and resources, to build a faculty for your alma mater. But again, there's ego, there's a lot of nuance of things. So again, as citizens and nationalists or intending nationalists, if we're going to move the dial in any sector, it's like when we talk about pipeline vandalization. Pipelines being vandalized by Nigerians. It's all a myriad of effects. So we're not going to move forward if we don't help ourselves. And it needs to start by us thinking, does that mean that government should not seek to improve and continue to explore new ways to improve, access to resources for institutions? That's incorrect. Government should do that. But again, it would not stop and end the government. Even if government were to dedicate its entire $3 billion, it would not take care of all the universities, federal and state, that we have in Nigeria today. And so that's to your question about the cost. In terms of skills, earning 3,000, I think Chioma had extensively spoken about the fact that one of the things I think that as young people is being a challenge is the fact that, because everybody said that someone in tech earns $10,000, you want to learn today, in 3 months, earn $3,000. Well, in some realms, it is possible. In some realms, I guess it's possible. And through some other means, it might be possible. But again, you need to think about sustainably doing it and being able to then increase from 3K to 5K to 10K to the point where you can earn 20K, maybe more, ultimately. Every good thing takes time. And so there's an entire process that you need to go through. I was chatting with Toby say, for me, I think that you ultimately need to spend at least a minimum of 2 to 3 years even learning. And that's why when Andela started, I think Andela's program was a 4-year program. And he will correct me. And even at that 4 years, I don't know if 3K was what they were earning. I'm sure it was pretty decent. But again, every quality takes time. And so we need to start to think about not just learning for the sake of quickly, same way we're learning to get certificates. Now everybody's learning to quickly get a tech job and a tech bro job. And again, it's not all about coding. I've been in technology for the last maybe 12 years as a salesperson. And my career has grown, ultimately. I started as a developer, but I don't remember last time I had to code. And same way for Fola here, Fola has moved into a lot of things. So I think that there is a range of opportunities. However, quality skill sets will take some time to build, and people need to be willing to trust the process and follow the process. For the role of media, I pretty much think advocacy and continue to amplify the good things more than the bad things would work. Maybe amplify the successful stories less than the EFCC arrest of fraudsters would be great. Don't be too quick to publish names of our undergraduates that were wrongly arrested. Would be a great one to do. I think that the media needs to stop moving with sensationalism. So you see a lot of news headlines, and maybe about 90% of headlines from media today is all sensation. When you read through and you're like, okay, the story does not really match the headline. And so I think that the media needs to be more intentional about investing some time and resources into promoting quality content and just ensuring, because essentially they are the ones feeding our minds and feeding what we all understand as perspectives today. Thank you.
Thank you. Fola, very quickly.
Yes. I think, first of all, I miss being completely in the private sector, where I could just be giving ideas for. And Joel and Chioma have both spoken, so I'll try to not speak about what they've said. A few caveats, though. So I'm the technical advisor to the minister, so it means I work for the minister. I don't work for the ministry, so I don't speak on behalf of the ministry. But I work with the ministry, and so I'm privy to some of the thinking of the ministry. We've been on the job now a little under 3 months. It feels like 10 years with the way we've put out a lot of things and the expectations on Twitter. People on Twitter are like, where's the policy? Where's the project? Where's the implementation? And it will come. But I think one thing we've very quickly understood, and I also encourage everyone to think about the work that they do as less an implementation problem and more a design problem. So we've very quickly seen that the issues that we're tackling today and the things that we want to do, the problem doesn't lie in what the exact job to be done. It's about thinking about the ideology behind the job, the reason it hasn't succeeded, the stakeholders that you have to play with, the change management process. And so the first thing that we have to understand is government is a continuum. So regardless of your political affiliation, there's the politics season, and then there's the governance season. And so our role as government is to constantly say, what do we have on ground? What do we have excess of? What can we control? And so that is going to guide. I just wanted to put that as the first caveat, that is guiding a lot of our thinking. We're asking ourselves that what are the things that we have in stock? So as a ministry, we have so many locations. So a lot of communities that don't have, good internet access, we've already built a center there. It's been built in the past, whether as local government projects, whether as senatorial projects, whether as government intervention programs, even private sector CSR projects. They have a porter cabin somewhere. In a post office, there's a room. In a secondary school, we all know those rooms. Locked, there's full of computers, but they've locked it. How do we start to reimagine and repurpose this asset? And so that's one thing I start to encourage. I'm speaking specifically about some of the questions. You know, location inclusion. It costs a lot of money to put the infrastructure for a telco to come to my village in Ijebu-Mushin, where there's 60 people during Christmas. So if you go there today, there's no Christmas, there's probably 15 people. But when I go there in Christmas, I'm always complaining, Airtel, MTN, where's service, where's all of that? And so we need to ask ourselves that, how do we put ourselves in the shoes of the telcos and ask, is it economically viable for a telco to give you the same level and quality of service in Ijebu-Mushin, which is 20 kilometers from Lagos State, as putting the same thing in Mushin in Lagos, which has a density of millions of people? And when you ask yourself that, as government, that is where things like the USPF, the Service Provisioning Fund, comes into play. That how do we subsidize the cost of infrastructure? Or how do we attach more industries? Because think about how cities form. A lot of cities are designed, like Abuja. Abuja is the model, The city center and some satellite cities have been designed. But they're designed around certain utilities. So Abuja was designed around government. Lagos was designed around the port and the trade. Kano was designed around commerce. So what do these communities, what do they have that they can be designed around that makes sense? And so I encourage you, don't just think about it from the perspective of they've not brought the internet. What are they bringing the internet to meet? As a populace and as government, we will continue to think about that. One thing that is clear to me is the government's agenda is really business-driven. It's a business case-driven agenda. Yes, we want to create opportunities for all Nigerians, but we want it to make sense for even the people. Because one of my favorite quotes is that when you don't know the purpose of something, you're going to abuse it. So we want to do that. And I'll very quickly just round up by addressing two questions. So the question around sensitization of the youth who are, doing internet fraud, Yahoo as we call it, network marketing, gambling. I think it addresses Toby's question around sensitization of the media. The government can only do so much in creating opportunities, in creating avenues for alternate things that they can be doing with their time. But at some point, we as people have to have a sense of ownership and ask ourselves that what is the role that we promote? How do we, even on social media, how do we treat people who have a decent earning? The question about $3,000, it's a very common question. And we sometimes say it tongue-in-cheek, but the intent is there. We see tech as a get-rich scheme, but there's nothing that's really get-rich, nothing. There's no sector. And the greatest strength of tech is its greatest weakness. Tech truly can be a leveler. The fact that you can sit down and register for 3MTT, so I'm putting a plug in there. 3MTT is the 3 million technical talent, and there's a training program now. But you can sit down anywhere in Nigeria, register for this program, get quality tech training, work within your community, and in a few months and years, you're ready to compete. That is its greatest strength, but it's also its greatest leveler, because you know what people do when they're sitting down? They're dreaming. They're dreaming, they're aspiring, and it's fine to aspire. But I think we need to, as people, encourage ourselves to grow versus trying to jump. The final thing I'll say is that we want to be held accountable as government. And let me speak specifically for my ministry. We want to be held accountable. There's a specific role for organizations such as think tanks to hold both the government and the private sector accountable. So you see the question the lady asked about government websites not being functional. We want you to ask those hard questions. And then we go back to the design problem. How are most of those websites built? Every 4 years, with every new minister change, there's a different contractor that has the email address, password, that is holding it hostage. True story. If you check across ministries, the developer has probably jackpot, the desk officer is on training somewhere or has no interest in giving you the password. And so people are forced to undergo a period of no connection. And so if we go back to what I said around design problems versus execution problems, what is the incentive of us to build systems whereby everything is connected to each other versus building isolated contracts? Because contractors don't build the nation. You know who builds the nation? People who are committed to growing ecosystems. There's the idea of the Nigerian stack that we're trying to build and develop. It's not so novel. India has something like that, the Indian stack, such that at the base of everything that everyone needs to do, financial inclusion, education, identity management, that exists. So regardless of the government MDA, you're able to connect and say, hey, I'm not building this for now or for now only. I'm building this long term. It's a system that isn't owned by one person. It's owned by everybody. It's the Nigeria stack. That is how we truly, truly build for growth. So once again, thank you for the opportunity. I hope I've answered most questions. I'm very mindful of our time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So as we round up, I just have 1 minute, and this will be to Iyin. Iyin, what are you excited about in the future? 1 minute, and then we'll round up. Are you still there? You're on mute.
No. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll say this, right? I'm really excited that we are in the midst of the challenges that we are, because it's an opportunity for us to build. We're in an unprecedented national crisis. Fuel subsidies are gone. The cost of energy is rising. Cost of food is rising. Cost of everything is rising. We're in an inflationary spiral. And in spite of all those things, what I'm really excited about is digging in to these challenges and identifying the opportunities in these challenges and ensuring that those opportunities can deliver billion-dollar outcomes. Because that's our history, right? With every challenge, we turn those challenges into global opportunities. So that's what I'm focused on. But perhaps before I know we don't have a lot of time, but I just wanted to say one thing about the media and education. The reality of the matter is that our media is making us dumber and dumber every day. And a lot of the people in this room have a real responsibility to play in educating the citizen. When we teach our citizens through media learned helplessness, right? That means we don't get into the details of issues. We just create outrage because that's what creates pains and all that. And we continue to desensitize people from the immediate connection to their solutions that are within their community, particularly at the lower levels of government, but most importantly, things they can do on their own. I think that that's a huge disservice to society. And the media really has to think about its role in bringing us to where we are today. A practical example, food inflation, for example, is a big challenge. However, there are institutions that are managing that crisis by coming together to actually farm, by coming together to pool their resources to lower the cost of food. Why is no one telling those stories, right? Of how people are solving their problems, so other people pick up ideas from that. The energy crisis is a real thing, but people are bringing solar, right? Using solar to reduce their costs. Why is no one telling those people's stories so other people get ideas? Why is no one telling the truth, the realities, the myths? Why is no one doing that? Instead, all of us point to Aso Rock as the source and the finisher of our country. And I don't see how Aso Rock can do much for us with the challenges that we are facing. We have a supply side inflation crisis. That means that we are in this position because we are not making enough stuff. No matter how much money Aso Rock gives us, the prices will keep rising. Media, you need to educate the citizens about what is going on. Stop lying to them. Tell them the truth. That is your job. Stop telling lies to citizens so they just get angry and click on your ads. Tell them the truth about what's going on. If you don't know the truth, go and find out for yourself. You have a responsibility to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on this note, we'll close this panel session. Thank you so much, CGID, for this opportunity, and I hope you all had a good time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before you go, a photo session. Thank you. A photo session.